You used it this morning. You stood in front of the mirror, grabbed a bottle, poured a capful of something that burns, swished it around your mouth for 30 seconds, spit, and felt clean. You have done this hundreds of times, maybe thousands. You never asked why. You never asked who told you your breath was a problem in the first place. There was a man named Gerard Lambert, born 1887, Princeton, class of 1908, studied architecture at Columbia, served in the First World War, came home, knocked around for a few years, and then joined his family's struggling pharmaceutical company in St. Louis sometime around 1921. Remember that name, Gerard Lambert, because in about 15 minutes, you are going to understand that this one man did something to your morning routine that has lasted over 100 years, and he did it with a single word. The company was called Lambert Pharmacal. His father, Jordan Wheat Lambert, had founded it in 1881 after licensing a formula from a chemist named Joseph Lawrence. The formula was an alcohol-based antiseptic: eucalyptol, menthol, methyl salicylate, thymol. Lawrence had named it Listerine, after the British surgeon Joseph Lister, who pioneered antiseptic surgery in 1865. Lister had nothing to do with the product. He never endorsed it. He never saw a penny from it. They just borrowed his name for credibility. For 40 years, Listerine went looking for a purpose. They marketed it as a surgical disinfectant, as a floor cleaner, as a treatment for dandruff, as a remedy for gonorrhea, as a cure for diphtheria, for dysentery, for smallpox, as a hair tonic. None of it worked commercially. By 1920, annual sales were sitting at about $115,000. The product tasted terrible. Nobody knew what it was for. The company was drifting. Then Gerard Lambert showed up and asked the company chemist a simple question. What is Listerine actually good for? The chemist came back with a clipping, a scrap from the British medical journal, The Lancet. On it was a word, a Latin word that had appeared in medical literature as far back as 1874, but that virtually no ordinary person had ever heard. Halitosis, from the Latin halitus meaning breath, and the Greek suffix osis meaning diseased condition. A clinical-sounding diagnosis for something every human being experiences: bad breath. Lambert looked at that word and, according to his own memoir published decades later, said, "There, that is something to hang our hat on." He did not invent a cure for a disease. He invented the disease. Then he sold the cure. Before 1921, bad breath was not a problem, not a social crisis, not a condition, not something you thought about when you got dressed in the morning. People had bad breath sometimes. Other people noticed. Everyone moved on. There was no product category for it. There was no anxiety around it. It was like body heat or stomach rumbling, a fact of being human. Gerard Lambert changed that in about 18 months. He started running advertisements, not the kind that said Listerine kills germs, which was technically true and commercially useless. He ran ads that said your breath might be destroying your life right now, and you would never know it because the people around you are too polite to tell you. That is the mechanism. Read it again. You cannot tell if your own breath smells. You cannot confirm that it does not, because confirmation would require someone else to say so. And the ads have just told you they never will. Your closest friends will not tell you. Your colleagues will not tell you. The person you are trying to date will simply stop returning your calls, and you will never know why. Lambert created what marketing scholars later called uncloseable uncertainty, a threat that can never be fully verified and therefore can never be fully dismissed. The only available response is to buy the product, not because it fixes the problem, because it is the only thing that makes the anxiety go quiet for a few hours. And the ads did not whisper. They screamed. In 1924, the campaign reached its peak with an advertisement that entered American culture permanently. The headline read, "Often a bridesmaid, never a bride." It told the story of a woman named Edna, beautiful, charming, every social grace you could want, approaching her 30s, and she could not find a husband. Not because of anything she did wrong, Not because of her looks or her personality or her choices, because of halitosis, a condition she could not detect, a condition her closest friends would not mention, a condition that was silently, invisibly, catastrophically ruining her life. The ad copy read, "Edna's case was really a pathetic one. Like every woman, her primary ambition was to marry." Other ads in the series asked, "Why did she leave him that way? Are you unpopular with your own children? That is why you are a failure." The ads did not just threaten embarrassment. They threaded halitosis into every possible human failure: career stagnation, romantic rejection, social isolation, marital collapse. If anything in your life was going wrong and you could not figure out why, the answer might be living inside your mouth, and you would be the last person to know. It worked. In 1921, Listerine made $115,000. By 1927, it made over $4 million, a 40-fold increase in 6 years. By the late 1920s, Listerine was the third largest print advertiser in the United States. Gerard Lambert's profits during his presidency of the company increased 60 times over. And they knew exactly what they were doing. Lambert did not hide it. He wrote about it. In 1956, he published a memoir called All Out of Step. In it, he described how he found the word halitosis in a British Lancet clipping and recognized that it sounded like a medical diagnosis. He described how the campaign was built around manufacturing fear about a condition that people did not previously consider a problem. He described the architecture of the anxiety machine he had built, and the book was reviewed by Time magazine under a headline that could not have been more precise: "The Father of Halitosis." He was not ashamed. He was proud. He was not even the only one who noticed. In 1931, a journalist named Frederick Lewis Allen published Only Yesterday, a history of the 1920s that became the definitive account of the decade. Allen devoted an entire section to the halitosis campaign. He described a gallery of unfortunates whose closest friends would not tell them. He quoted the ads directly. He saw it for what it was: the deliberate manufacture of social anxiety for profit. He published it in a best-selling book that is still in print. And it changed nothing. The anxiety was already loose. Naming a manipulation does not undo it, not when the shame has had 10 years to take root. You know what he did after that? He sold his stake in Lambert Pharmacal in 1928 for approximately $25 million. In 1928 dollars. He was 40 years old. He bought a 3-masted schooner that had belonged to the Vanderbilt family and spent years sailing. He later became president of Gillette Safety Razor Company. He lived until 1967. He died at 80, rich, celebrated, and utterly untroubled by what he had done. The company he left behind kept building on his foundation. In the 1930s and 1940s, Listerine pivoted to new fear campaigns: infectious dandruff. Pour Listerine on your scalp and the flakes would vanish, they promised. Then came the colds. Gargle with Listerine and you will not get sick this winter. They ran that claim from the 1930s through the 1970s. 4 decades. An entire generation grew up believing that a bottle of mouthwash could protect them from respiratory illness, because the company that had already made them afraid of their own breath told them so. And once you have accepted one medical claim from a brand, you are primed to accept the next. That is the ratchet. Each lie makes the next lie easier. In 1972, the Federal Trade Commission finally came after them. They filed an administrative complaint alleging that Listerine had been falsely advertised as preventing and curing colds and sore throats since at least 1921. The case took years. The evidence was enormous. A survey presented in court showed that 70% of the American public believed Listerine was effective against colds. Not 50, not some vague majority, 70%. That number is not a marketing success. It is a measurement of how deeply a corporate lie can embed itself in a population over half a century of repetition. In December 1975, the FTC ruled that the claims were false. In 1977, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the ruling in Warner Lambert Company versus FTC. The court ordered something that had never been done before in American regulatory history: corrective advertising. The company was ordered to spend $10 million running ads that said, explicitly, contrary to prior advertising, Listerine will not help prevent colds or sore throats or lessen their severity. That was 1977. It was the first litigated case of enforced corrective advertising in United States history. But read that again carefully. The FTC went after the cold claims, not the halitosis claims. No regulator, no court, no government agency ever successfully forced Listerine to retract the foundational manipulation. The idea that bad breath is a chronic, shameful, socially catastrophic medical condition requiring daily treatment with a commercial product. That claim was never challenged. It was never investigated. It was never corrected. Because by 1977, it did not need defending. It had become true by consensus. When enough people believe something is a necessary hygiene practice, questioning it feels like questioning hygiene itself. Try telling someone you do not use mouthwash. Watch their face. That micro-expression of discomfort, the slight pulling back, that is not biology. That is Gerard Lambert, still working, 100 years later, from a grave in New Jersey. That is the deepest layer of this story. Lambert did not just sell mouthwash. He rewrote a social norm. He took something that was not a problem and made it into one. And once the anxiety was embedded, once an entire generation had grown up believing that their breath was a ticking social bomb, the manipulation no longer required an advertiser to maintain it. Mothers told daughters, friends told friends. The shame self-replicated. The product became a necessity not because of chemistry, but because of culture. The advertising could stop entirely, and the behavior would continue, because the shame had become a belief being inherited, not a message being broadcast. You know what happened after Lambert built this machine? Everybody copied it. The template he created, using manufactured shame about an invisible, unverifiable personal condition to drive demand for a product that provides temporary reassurance but can never fully eliminate the anxiety, became the dominant American advertising strategy of the 20th century. In 1919, just 2 years before Lambert weaponized halitosis, an advertising man named James Webb Young at the J. Walter Thompson Agency had written an ad for a deodorant called Odorono, with the headline, "Within the Curve of a Woman's Arm." 200 readers of the Ladies' Home Journal canceled their subscriptions in protest, but sales of Odorono rose 112%. The protest proved the ad worked. Shame that causes outrage still causes shame. The women who canceled were angry precisely because the ad had made them feel something they did not want to feel, which meant it had already gotten inside. Lifebuoy soap coined the term BO, body odor, and ran campaigns where men lost promotions and women lost husbands because nobody would tell them the truth about how they smelled. The structure was identical to Listerine: invisible threat, social catastrophe, purchased salvation. Fleischmann's yeast told Americans that constipation was secretly destroying their social lives. Scott Paper ran advertisements suggesting that using the wrong toilet paper could lead to infections requiring rectal surgery. Each campaign targeted a different body part. Each used the same architecture: invisible problem, shame, product. Then Lysol went further than any of them. From the 1920s through the 1950s, Lysol was marketed not as a household cleaner, but as a feminine hygiene product. The advertisements, running in mainstream women's magazines, told wives that their marriages were in danger because of intimate odor that they could not detect and their husbands would never mention. The solution, according to Lysol, was to use their industrial-strength disinfectant internally as a douche. Women did this. They used a product designed to clean floors on the most sensitive tissue in their bodies. There were chemical burns. There were infections. There were poisonings. There were deaths. Between 1911 and 1961, at least 193 poisoning cases and 5 deaths were linked to Lysol's use as a feminine product. the ads kept running. And that is just one industry. The mechanism Lambert built is still operating in every aisle of every drugstore you have ever walked into. Dandruff shampoo, whitening toothpaste, feminine hygiene sprays, anti-aging serums, pore minimizing creams. Each one sits on a shelf because someone, decades ago, took a normal aspect of being human and framed it as a deficiency requiring a purchased solution. The formula has not changed since 1921. Find a natural condition, give it a medical-sounding name, tell people they have it and cannot tell, sell the treatment, repeat. Here is the biological truth about bad breath. Halitosis is real. It is caused by volatile sulfur compounds, specifically hydrogen sulfide, methyl mercaptan, and dimethyl sulfide, produced by anaerobic gram-negative bacteria metabolizing sulfur-containing amino acids on the tongue coating and in periodontal pockets. Approximately 85 to 90% of halitosis cases are oral in origin. The condition exists. It is measurable. It is biological. What Lambert manufactured was not the condition. He manufactured the shame, the catastrophizing, the idea that it defines you, the idea that it is happening right now and you cannot tell and no one will save you. The idea that the only rational response is to pour alcohol and thymol into your mouth every single morning for the rest of your life. Listerine does temporarily reduce oral bacteria. It does mask odor for a period of time, but it does not cure the bacterial cause. It cannot close the anxiety loop. The bacteria return within hours. The worry returns sooner, and that is the business model. A product that fully solved the problem would be purchased once. A product that manages the fear is purchased forever. Lambert did not design a medicine. He designed a subscription to relief from an anxiety that his company created. There is one more detail in this story that most people never hear. The original 1881 licensing agreement between Joseph Lawrence and Jordan Wheat Lambert was handwritten. It was scrawled on a copy of a medical journal called Medical Brief. It specified royalties of $20 per gross of 144 bottles, later reduced to $6, payable to Lawrence and his heirs, executors, or assigns, for as long as Listerine was sold. No end date, no termination clause, no sunset provision. Joseph Lawrence died in 1909. His 15-year-old granddaughter Vera Hopkins inherited the royalty rights. Between 1909 and 1928, the Hopkins family collected over $4 million, roughly $65 million in today's dollars. In 1950, Vera's son sold his half of the royalty stake to a real estate developer named John J. Reynolds for $4 million. Reynolds later sold his interest to the Catholic Archdiocese of New York, which collected approximately $13 million over the decades it held the stake. In 1959, Warner Lambert, the company that had absorbed Lambert Pharmacal, sued to terminate the perpetual contract. They argued that since the Listerine formula was now public knowledge, the royalty obligation should end. The case went to the Southern District of New York. Warner Lambert Pharmaceutical Company versus John J. Reynolds Incorporated. The court ruled against the company. The contract was clear. No end date meant no end date. Pay. And they paid. Through the Pfizer acquisition in 2000, through the Johnson & Johnson acquisition in 2006, through every corporate restructuring, every billion-dollar merger, every change of ownership. In 2014, Johnson & Johnson paid out $23,637,782 in royalties to the heirs of a chemist who wrote a formula in 1879 and licensed it on a scrap of medical journal paper in 1881. 133 years after the handshake. Tens of millions of dollars, still flowing, to people whose only connection to the product is a bloodline running back to a pharmacist in St. Louis who mixed 4 ingredients in a bottle and named it after a surgeon he never met. A handshake deal from the 19th century is still generating tens of millions of dollars annually. The product it covers exists only because a man found a Latin word in a newspaper clipping and realized it sounded like a disease. Go into your bathroom. Look at the bottle. It is probably on the shelf right now. Green, gold, blue, purple, whatever variant they are pushing this quarter. $7 billion in global mouthwash sales, an entire product category that did not exist before 1921, built on a word that a company chemist found in a clipping from The Lancet. You will use it tomorrow morning. You will swish it around, spit it out, and feel clean. And somewhere in that 30 seconds, you might remember that the burn you are feeling is not medicine working. It is the ghost of a Princeton graduate from 1908 who needed a word to hang his hat on, found one, turned it into a disease, sold the cure for 6 years, pocketed $25 million, and went sailing. They got you. Now you know how.